Why, those are Howard's. What on earth are you doing with Howard Bannister's rocks?
You give it away, baby. Yeah. You had no right to do that. He doesn't belong to you. Oh, it's all your fault. You ruined it.
Oh, I've had enough. I quit.
Now, it isn't that I don't like you, Susan, because, after all, in moments of quiet, I'm strangely drawn toward you, but, well, there haven't been any quiet moments.
Who is that dangerously unbalanced woman?
For God's sake, don't shoot me. I'm part Italian.
What, Ned?
Well, let's not say goodbye. Let's just say au revoir.
No, let's say goodbye.
This is outrageous. Ah! Thieves! Robbers!
Mr. Bannister, I have a message for you from the staff of the hotel.
Really? What is it?
Goodbye.
Don't touch me, I'm a doctor.
Have what?
Music?
Can you fix a hi-fi?
No, sir.
Then shut up.
What's up, Doc?
Hello, I'm Brad Shreve, a big-time movie buff.
And I'm Tony Maeda, and I'm not a film historian, I'm the film historian. Welcome to Going Hollywood.
And Tony, you need to seek some help. We discuss movies and television from Hollywood's golden age. We'll stir some of your fondest or maybe not so fond memories. We go behind the scenes and share our opinions too.
And for our astute listeners out there, I was clearly quoting a line from one of my favorite movies. And Brad, I believe it's one of your favorite movies. And it's a movie we're going to talk about today, 1972. What's Up, Doc?
Oh, it's Hi, I'm one of my favorites. Hi.
Yeah, you said that. You said that like offhandedly, I think because we were talking about Streisand. And I was like, oh, really?
No,
it's one of my favorites too.
We may come up with some different opinions on scenes, but I doubt this is not going to be one I don't think this is going to be that controversial. Maybe when we talk about Bringing Up Baby, but not this one.
I think that What's Up, Doc is pretty much, I'm always amazed how many people say to me when they ask me because people have a tendency to say, what are your favorite movies? And I'll ask them, well, what are your favorite movies? And What's Up, Doc always seems to be up there. It's crazy. It's crazy how many people love What's Up, Doc. And I understand it. It's a wonderful, fun movie.
Now, see, I get a different experience. I am shocked by the number of people that have never even heard or at least never watched the film.
You got to stop talking to these young guys, Brad.
Well,
don't know who Barbra Streisand is probably at this point. Really, that's interesting. See, I think that I just feel like it's in every gay man's DNA. But then again, that's just me being optimistic about it, I think, probably. But let me ask you a question, since we're talking about everybody knowing What's Up, Doc, or not knowing it. Were you aware, or did you have knowledge of the idea that What's Up, Doc was based on a 1938 film called Bringing Up Baby?
No, I did not. And having watched this movie before and seen some of the same stunts, wasn't identical, but some of the same stunts, you would have thought I would have caught it. But it was actually a long time ago that I watched it. So when I watched it again for this show, it was very nice. It was like watching it all over again for the first time. I didn't remember so much that it wasn't like watching a new show.
Yeah. Here's the thing is that Bringing Up Baby is, for me, the ultimate screwball farce. Now, in the 30s, there was a wonderful period known as the screwball comedy period. And what that was basically these wonderfully insane, I hate to use that word all the time, but wonderfully crazy films that were very verbal and had all kinds of energy. And they took place in a reality all their own. And this happened because when the production code came into force in 1934, it was very strict about what they could show and what they couldn't show and what they could say and what they couldn't say. And sex was, of course, number one on the list that you can't show. So when people can't make love physically, how do they do that? How do you show that? Well, they do it verbally. And not only make love verbally, they fight verbally. So movies got very verbal. The screwball era started right after the production code kicked in and lasted pretty much to the beginning of World War II. So about 10 years. And yes, for me personally, I've seen a lot of screwball movies, a lot of screwball comedies. The minute I put Bringing Up Baby on and I see Cary Grant in his Harold Lloyd glasses, it just makes me happy. I just smile. And then when I see Hepburn, I just start giggling and I'm just in for the ride of my life.
I'm always smiling when I see Hepburn. Now, some people may be just like me that have seen the movie, but don't necessarily remember everything. So just give a really quick synopsis.
Sure. So Cary Grant plays David Huxley, who is a mild-mannered paleontologist. And for the past few years, he has been trying to assemble the skeleton of a brontosaurus, but he's missing one bone, just one bone, the intercostal clavicle. And if you want to laugh, hear Cary Grant say intercostal clavicle over and over again. So he's a very mild-mannered, very milquetoast. His life is set. And just as he's about to get married, the day before, actually, he quite literally is bowled over by this freewheeling heiress named Susan Vance, who is played by Katharine Hepburn. And for the remainder of the movie, it's how she sets out to systematically destroy his life because she's in love with him. So what do you do when you fall in love with somebody? You pretty much set out to destroy their life. So you can kind of see, for anybody who's familiar with What's Up, Doc, that's kind of the same thing about What's Up, Doc. The premise is the same. You have this stuffy creature very much set in his ways, this academic whose life is blown apart by this freewheeling kook that he meets. And at the end, of course, ends up with her.
And I don't know, did you mention that he is engaged?
Yes, he's about to get married. It's the day before he gets married that he meets Susan Vance on the golf course.
Yeah, so Cary Grant, Dr. Huxley, who's also known as hysterically Dr. Bones, is engaged, soon to be married, and then we have Catherine. I don't know what's going to happen then.
I didn't say Dr. Huxtable, did I? I hope not.
No, you did not say Dr. Huxtable. That would be very easy to do, but you did not do it.
Dr. Huxley, David Huxley. Yes, and so the bones, quote unquote, paleontology joke, of bringing up baby are in What's Up, Doc. But the idea that What's Up, Doc is based on bringing up baby is overblown, and it's not true. Peter Bogdanovich, who directed What's Up, Doc, who is, besides being a director and a writer and a sometime actor, he was a film buff of the nth degree. That's how he began his career, and he adored these films. And so he himself said that the premise of What's Up, Doc is the same as Bringing Up Baby, but there's only one joke from Bringing Up Baby that's in What's Up, Doc.
Kind of two.
What are the jokes? You tell me.
One of them is his Kate Hepburn, I can't think of it. Susan
Vance
grabs Dr. Huxley from the back and rips his suit.
Tuxedo jacket.
His tuxedo jacket. That happened in What's Up, Doc.
Right.
The other is the fiancé. In both instances.
Yes.
In both instances. But I will say one thing What's Up, Doc has way over Bringing Up Baby is Madeline Kahn.
Well, that's part of the premise. Have him being engaged. And yes, the part of Alice in Bringing Up Baby comes nowhere near the comic masterpiece that is Madeline Kahn in What's Up, Doc. So I see what you're saying. But yeah, you got it right about the tuxedo jacket. And the basic premise is right. But let's get so a little bit of background about Bringing Up Baby before we go.
Actually, I have a question because I'm curious if you know about this. It's so popular right now, and I've seen the numbers, and it doesn't look to me like it did that bad. But I heard it did so badly. It was a bomb that it really affected Hawks and Hepburn's careers.
No, not at all. That's not true at all. First of all, it wasn't a bomb. It cost $1.1 million and it made $1.1 million. It did very well in some cities like San Francisco and the urban centers as usual, but it was not a bomb. That's a myth. It was not a financial success at its first release. Now, in the 40s, because none of Katharine Hepburn's films, this is the thing, the late 30s, Katharine Hepburn, in fact, not long after this film was released, she got the famous label box office poison. Because none of her films, after her initial success in the early 30s, none of her films, say post 1935, made money. So there's that myth that that it was a huge bomb. It wasn't. When it was re-released in the early 40s after Katharine Hepburn's resurgence, after the Philadelphia story, and she pretty much reconstructed her career, it made money. So it was never a bomb. It lost money at first. And then it eventually made money until in the mid-late 60s, when college students discovered it. This happened a lot in the late 60s because this is the generation that was pretty much brought up on television. And when they were of college age, they discovered films. And what did they discover? They discovered these fabulous classic films like The Awful Truth, like Bringing Up Baby, Humphrey Bogart had his huge career resurgence long after he died because they discovered The Maltese Falcon and Casablanca and all these films. So that is when it really began its ascent into the pantheon of legendary screwball comedies. And to me, as I said before, to me, it's number one. It's my absolute favorite screwball. I think of it more of a screwball farce as opposed to a screwball comedy because everybody in this film is absolutely nuts. There's not one sane person in this film.
Tony, I'm stopping our conversation real quick.
Why? Brett, we're in the middle of a podcast.
But this is about the podcast, and it's very important.
Okay.
Listener, whatever app you're listening on, whether it's on the computer or on the phone, reach your finger or your mouse over. It usually says follow. Some still say subscribe. And click that. And what's going to happen when they do that, Tony?
They're going to get notified when a new episode is available. And they can listen to us again. You don't want to miss that.
No.
Can we get back to the episode that we were recording?
Of course.
Please?
Of course.
All right. Thank you. Don't forget to subscribe and follow.
There you go. I heard that Hawks said after the movie was done, the one mistake he made was every character was nuts.
Yes. He did say that. And he's absolutely right. See, look, for me, whenever anybody asks me for a screwball comedy and I suggest Bringing Up Baby, I always say, look, you have to give yourself over to it. You just have to go for the ride. And if you do, you will not regret it. It's totally worth the investment. But he was right. What he meant was that the audience needs one person to identify with. They need one normal person because if they have one person to identify with, they're acting as a portal into this world. The audience is saying, oh, they're seeing it from this person who they can identify with. Does that make sense? So they need somebody to identify with because that person then carries them into this strange world of insanity that is Bringing Up Baby. So he had a very valid point. I don't know who that sane person would be, though, in that film.
Well, I'm thinking of Green Acres, which is one of my all-time favorite TV shows, and I know a lot of people just groaned. We will do a show about it because it is a lot more intelligent than people think it is. In that, if you watch Green Acres, the earliest episodes, Oliver was just as nutty as everybody else. But they very quickly, he still was kind of heavy duty on wanting a farm. But beyond that, he wasn't nearly as nutty. He was the straight man. And that's what was so funny about it. He was the straight man in this just surreal world where everybody is nuts.
It's exactly the same thing. Think of it as Dorothy entering the land of Oz.
True.
Dorothy is us entering this strange land. Well, in a screwball, we need someone like a Dorothy to lead us through this crazy, mixed up world. Now, for me, like I said, Bringing Up Baby just works regardless. But Hawks did say that. And he was also, looking back from the perspective that, it was becoming a cult hit. So he was trying to figure out something to say about it that would interest people, I think. Yeah. And that's probably it.
I don't know if I agree with him. I think as a rule, that is a good rule, but I think this one worked, even though he didn't do that.
Yeah, well, it absolutely works for me. But like I said, I give myself over to it. I feel like, to me, it feels like you just have to let go and let it wash over you. And you enter this delicious world of insanity. Hepburn is so charming. She was never so light, so ebullient, so effervescent as she is in Bringing Up Baby. And what's sad is she never did it again. She had never done it before. And we can get to the stories about that. And she never did it again, which is kind of sad because she's a brilliant, farcical comedian. And that's so sad, but she's so lovely, so wonderful. And I adore her in this film.
The one thing I have got to say that just blew me away, as you know, Katharine Hepburn is the only actor to win 4 Oscars. Nobody else has earned that many. And this movie, even though this movie was snubbed in the Oscars, this movie shows me exactly why. She has done so much drama. She's done every kind of emotion there is. And here, for the first time, I see her hysterical. And I think it's a shame as well that she never did this again.
Hysterically funny. Yes. Yes.
She was brilliant.
Well, here's something that's interesting is that, and this goes on with what you're saying, is that she wasn't initially getting it. Now, like I said, she had never done this kind of farce before. when they developed. This story was developed for her. It was based on a short story by Hager Wilde, and it was adapted by screenwriter Dudley Nichols as a story specifically for Katharine Hepburn. And when they first started filming, and the story is about an heiress who inherits a leopard. We didn't talk about the leopard when we were giving the breakdown of the plot, because it happens about 45 minutes into the story. Suddenly she has a leopard, but a leopard the leopard is Baby. That's who they're bringing up. So the leopard is a big part of the plot. But anyway, so when she first started acting it, she wasn't getting it. Farce is a style. You have to learn it. So Howard Hawks turned to Walter Catlett, who plays the constable in the film, that hysterically funny constable who throws them in jail, and said, can you help her out? So what he did was basically give her a crash course in playing screwball comedy. And hello, clearly she got it like that because she's so brilliant. So when you talk about the fact that how brilliant she was and everything that she did, and she was a pretty damn fast learner because it was, it was like she's Mensa with this kind of level of ability. And she doesn't know how to do it. She's told how to do it, and she becomes the ultimate screwball heroine. Amazing.
And we miss something that I think everybody misses. I don't hear much of this, maybe flippantly, but to me, it's actually critical to the film. And it's only about 30 seconds long because you think, okay, this guy's engaged and he's going to run off with this girl. And, that's kind of a cad. What's really important at the beginning is his fiance reminds me very much of Lilith on Frasier. She's that cold. And she says to him, when they're talking about the honeymoon, she says, nothing must interfere with our work. Our marriage must entail no domestic entanglements of any kind.
Yeah.
And he's like, any kind? So,
so he's ripe for the picking. He's ripe for the picking. That's the thing, when Hepburn comes upon him, he's right. He's ready. He's ready for it. You see it. There's a part of him which is longing to burst forth. And we talk about Cary Grant for a minute in this. Cary Grant had just made The Awful Truth the year before, and The Awful Truth was finally the film that really created the Cary Grant persona. So after The Awful Truth, he became, in every respect, Cary Grant. And so this was an unusual role for him to take because he also didn't know how to do it. Like Hepburn, he wasn't sure exactly how to play this part of this bumbling academic. And Howard Hawks said to him, go talk to Harold Lloyd. Now, Harold Lloyd was one of the big three silent film stars, Chaplin, Keaton, and Lloyd. And Lloyd's character was called the Glass character. He was this guy who got into all kinds of problems, and his hallmark was this pair of glasses he would wear. So Grant went and talked to Lloyd, got some pointers, and basically based his characterization on Harold Lloyd. So you have, these two iconic actors in what became an iconic film, both having difficulties at first, and both finding their characters and giving performances which are, in my opinion, legendary in comedic film.
And one thing I got to say about that is Cary Grant really pulled off the absent-minded professor with the glasses on. Even though he's gorgeous, it worked. Right. I think it worked in What's Up, Doc, too, but Ryan O'Neal still looked like Ryan O'Neal.
Well, Ryan O'Neal was trying to emulate Cary Grant, but he wasn't doing a very good job. But Ryan O'Neal was also playing Peter Bogdanovich, so we can get to that later. But
yeah. But I was just talking about the look. I think Grant carried it better, but I also think there's a difference, and we will get to that.
Yes, but the thing I want to stress about What's Up, Doc, about bringing up Baby being What's Up, Doc being based on Bringing Up Baby is that What's Up, Doc is based on a lot of screwball comedies. There's a lot of screwball influences in What's Up, Doc. It's not just Bringing Up Baby. It's The Lady Eve. It's Easy Living. It's My Man Godfrey. There's a whole slew of comedies that suggest that what Peter Bogdanovich was trying to do was create a modern screwball comedy, because screwball pretty much disappeared, as I said, at the beginning of the war and never came back. So what Bogdanovich was trying to do was create a modern screwball comedy based a lot on the premise of Bringing Up Baby.
And for those that are younger, not young, who may not be familiar with screwball comedies, I'm going to give an example because almost half of it is just there's a big misunderstanding.
Yeah.
So if you've ever seen Three's Company, it is like a modern TV version, because that was every week. It was just a big misunderstanding. In fact, one of my favorite lines in Friends was they're all watching Three's Company, and Chandler goes, "Oh, I remember this episode. It's the one where there's a big misunderstanding." So,
yeah, I'm going to kind of cringe at your example of Three's Company.
Oh, I'm not.
But yes, screwball comedies are very often based on a misunderstanding. They're very often based on people at cross purposes.
Yeah, I was not saying they're the same quality. Please,
no, I
let
understand.
me get that in there.
I understand what you were saying, but I think that the reason that Bringing a Baby is another level of screwball, as I said, it's more like a screwball farce than a screwball comedy, because it's so untethered to any kind of reality but its own. And that's what farce is. Farce is, Buck Henry said, Buck Henry was a screenwriter on What's Up Doc. And he said, farce generally means it's about nothing but itself. And that's what Bringing Up Baby is. It exists in its own reality with this wonderful, wonderful cast of oddball characters. I mean, May Robeson, who we just talked about in A Star Is Born, by the way. May Robeson plays her Aunt Elizabeth. Hysterical. Charlie Ruggles, who was a great standby comedic actor. Walter Catlett, Barry Fitzgerald. I mean, these are the hallmarks of 30s comedies. And they're all in this film supporting Hepburn and Grant in this wonderful, insane ride. It's Bringing Up Baby.
When we get a little more detail, I want to talk about Charles Ruggles, because I loved his character. But as far as the aunt goes, I would argue she is one of the few somewhat straight characters in here. She was the debutante. Well, not debutante. That's a important word. But
heiress.
She had craziness around her, and she wasn't like confused like the straight person, but she kind of was dragged into it all by all these crazy people.
But she's funny because she won't listen to anybody. She doesn't listen to anybody in that film. She's constantly going against whatever Charlie Ruggles is saying to her. She's like, don't be ridiculous. Come over here. I mean, she is in her own world too. She's not listening to anybody. She doesn't understand what's going on. And some of the funny inside jokes in this book, this film, as I said, was designed for Hepburn. It was written for Hepburn. And it went over budget and it went over time because Hepburn and Grant, who had worked together before by this time and were just perfect partners at this point in their career. They were so perfect together. We're constantly making each other laugh by all the double entendres. Because first of all, I think there's a line where they talk about, they're looking for a dinosaur bone. And there's a lot of lines like the bones in the box. In the beginning of the film, they're trying to figure out the place to put one of the bones. And Alice says to Grant, or Grant says to Alice, I can't remember which one, did you try it in the tail? And she says, we tried it in the tail last week. So there are so many double entendres that go right over the audience's head. And this was cracking them up.
I'm glad you mentioned, because that one jumped out at me.
That's a very funny line. And you're like, did I just hear that? Did they realize what they were saying? And of course they realized what they were saying. And of course, the big one, the elephant in the room, one that's always played whenever you talk about the celluloid closet or the history of gay cinema, is Cary Grant in the negligee when he first meets May Robeson as Aunt Elizabeth. And she wants to know why he's in these clothes, why he's in a negligee. And he's so exasperated. He says, I just went gay all of a sudden. And he jumps in the air. And you're like, did he just say that? Did he mean that? And Bogdanovich said that, although gay was not a common term to mean homosexuals then, he very well could have, that's very well what he could have meant. And it could have what the screenwriters meant. And it just went over the censors' heads. Or he could have meant gay as in deliriously happy.
And this intrigued me so much, I had to deep dive into it, because I've heard the argument that he was referring to gay as homosexual. And I've heard the argument that he was referring like a gay and frivolous evening kind of thing. So I had to find out, because I thought, I don't think gay was used then. Right. So I looked, gay became somewhat common, not heavily like it is now, but somewhat common in the 20s. But they believe it actually started in the late 1800s. And there's two movies. You see this movie being credited as the first one to use that. And there's actually two movies before that. Did you know that?
Remind me, because I'm
I only
having a
know
blank.
this because I deeped it because this was really intriguing me.
This is a deep dive.
Yeah.
That used the term gay,
Yes.
referring to homosexuals.
The first one kind of, sort of should get the first one. It was cut, but it's called My Weakness. It was in 1933.
Mm-hmm.
And
Pre-code, obviously.
there's two men that are after this woman, and she's snubbing them both. And one of them says, let's be gay. Now that was cut out.
Mm-hmm.
Then, oh my God, I can't think of the other movie. I'll have to look it up while we talk. There's another movie where a decorator it was about probably 5 years before this one. A decorator is showing floral patterns for curtains and a chair to this man. And the man says, and the decorator is a little flamboyant. And the man says, it strikes me as a bit too gay. Now, both of those the let's be gay is kind of hard to interpret otherwise. It strikes me as a bit too gay. I think it'd be read either way. And that's probably why it passed.
Well, yeah, I think that's the thing. It wasn't common use enough that it would have flagged the production code. It would have flagged the censors to say, wait a minute, are you talking about homosexuality? And gotten up in arms. I mean, before the code crackdown, there were plenty of depictions of gay characters in films like Call Her Savage. Takes place, there's a scene in the gay bar. And I mean, so there's lots of depictions of it, but I don't know that term was used before then. But I don't want to get in that rabbit hole because then it becomes a whole other podcast.
Right.
But that is something that, I mean, that's just another one of these Easter eggs that are in Bringing Up Baby, which to all modern audiences are just so funny because you're just wondering, do they know what they're saying? Is that true? And they did, and they do. And you can see it in Cary Grant's eyes, too. He knows what he's doing.
So I want you to explain to me, because you said this movie wasn't a bomb as people claim it is.
Right.
But my understanding is Hawks was fired by the studio right after this, and Kate, they were going to throw into a bunch of B movies because this movie did so poorly. Can you speak on those?
This was for Katharine Hepburn. Yes, Hawks was let go from RKO after this. It didn't make money. So it wasn't, what I meant was it wasn't the colossal, Hepburn and Tracy, it just rolls off the tongue. Hepburn and Grant's first film was a notorious flop called Sylvia Scarlett, in which throughout half of the movie, more than half the movie, she masquerades as a boy. That was a huge, huge bomb. Today, it is a cult classic. People want to see this because it was so far ahead of its time. And it's actually a very good movie. So Hepburn had a series of these films that bombed and that didn't bomb, that didn't make money. She did Stage Door before she did Bringing Up Baby. It made a very little amount of money, but she was also in a cast of incredible actresses. So it was just like one thing after another with Hepburn. And finally, when this film came out, she got the famous moniker Box Office Poison because her movies just weren't making money. She wasn't clicking anymore with the American public. When she came out in 32 in Bill of Divorcement, she was this exotic creature. No one had ever seen the likes of this girl before. The way she spoke, the way she moved, the way she looked. She was exotic. She was like the American Garbo, they tried to bill her as. And that wore off after a couple movies.
Well, and I want to say this kind of shows how Hollywood works. She had already won her first Oscar before this movie. And so she won an Oscar, and then very quickly, she's poisoned. That's so Hollywood.
She very quickly fell out of favor, and she lost her footing. So she did right after this movie, almost, before Hepburn and Grant went into Holiday, the film Holiday, right after this, probably before this movie was even released, they started working on Holiday, which was another comedy, but it was a sophisticated comedy. It was a comedy of manners. It was based on a Philip Berry play. It wasn't a screwball. So she did Holiday, and that's when, after Holiday, she had a really tough time, and that's when they offered her Mother Cary's Chickens. Now, the title alone, can you imagine Katharine Hepburn in a film called Mother Cary's Chickens? That's when she saw the writing on the wall.
I don't know who starred in that, but I'm scratching my head, and I certainly don't recall ever hearing of that film.
You've never heard of Mother Cary's Chickens?
No. Has anybody?
Mother Cary's Chickens starred Anne Shirley. Do you know who Anne Shirley is?
No. You're going to tell me I should know. I probably know her by face.
You don't need to know who Anne Shirley is. So Hepburn was horrified. Hepburn saw the writing on the wall and realized she had to buy herself out of her RKO contract. So she left RKO and had Philip, you know, when Philip Berry's a friend of yours and he says, I want to write a play for you. Okay. And Philip Berry wrote the Philadelphia Story and she was off to the races again. So none of them did. Grant came out of all of this unscathed. He came out of Sylvia Scarlett unscathed. In fact, he was ahead of the game after Sylvia Scarlett. Sylvia Scarlett gave him an idea of what kind of actor he was. George Cukor said he felt the ground under his feet because before Sylvia Scarlett, he'd just been kind of like a run-of-the-mill, gorgeous leading man, but who had no discernible personality. And Sylvia Scarlett gave him a personality, and suddenly, you know, what happens when you feel the ground under your feet? You're standing up straight. You know who you are. You're owning your space. So he actually came out ahead. So the myths about Bringing Up Baby being a huge stinkeroo flop, just not true. It didn't make money the first time, but it wasn't this colossal bomb.
Now, Kate did buy her contract out, so she wouldn't star in these $3,500 movie, whatever it is.
$3,000 budget.
$3,000 budget.
I'm sorry, $300,000 budget.
The number that I heard that she paid the studio is astronomical considering it's 1938. I heard $220,000.
Oh, I believe it. But she had the resources. She had some rich friends. One of them named Howard Hughes.
Yeah,
you know, so she was always buying. This wasn't the first time she bought herself out of a contract. She bought herself out of a contract with Jed Harris when she was in a play called The Lake. But I don't want to go into a Katharine Hepburn, you know, rabbit hole. But she also arranged, smart woman, she also arranged to own the rights to the Philadelphia Story. Had Howard Hughes either bought them for her and gave them to her, or he worked with her on it. But when it came time, the Philadelphia Story was a huge hit on Broadway. So when it came time to make the film version of the Philadelphia Story, guess who owns the rights? Katharine Hepburn does. So these studios have got to deal with Katharine Hepburn. And of course, this was all she planned all this because she knew no studio was going to allow her. They would put another star in the Philadelphia Story, so she had to own it in order to make her comeback. And who did she want in the Philadelphia Story? Well, she wanted Spencer Tracy,
of course,
to play it, and Clark Gable to be in it. She wasn't going to get Spencer Tracy and Clark Gable, but who did she get? She said Jimmy Stewart, because he was under contract to MGM. MGM had bought it, and anybody else you want for the second part. And of course, who did she pick to be her co-star? Cary Grant. So this is just how much these two meant to each other and how important they were to each other's careers at this time.
Before we transfer over to What's Up, Doc, I want to talk about two scenes really quickly.
Okay.
One just really blew my mind, and that is the scene inside the country club.
Oh, fuck,
how it got past the censors. The back of her dress gets ripped off, and she's wearing tights, but you can pretty much see her ass. And Cary immediately puts his top hat, which was a very nice top hat, to cover her butt.
Mm-hmm.
And he then follows her around directly behind her, very, very close to her, so that people don't see it.
Such a wonderful scene.
Are you not amazed they got away with that?
Well, I'm amazed that they could do it. First of all, that was an old vaudeville bit that from his days in vaudeville as an acrobat. This is what's amazing about Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. You know, he was an acrobat. He had such incredible control over his body. And he was constantly coming up with little bits that he had done in vaudeville, and he incorporated them into his films. So that's such a wonderful thing. They are literally pressed up, you know, get behind me. Well, get closer. He's like, I can't get any closer. And they walk out in lockstep. And it's such a wonderful scene. I love that. I don't find anything necessarily salacious about it. I think it's hysterically funny and a brilliant bit, but I don't find anything necessarily salacious about that.
Oh, I certainly don't, but I would have thought at that time they would.
Well, no, because it's an old vaudeville bit.
Okay, so that's how they got away with it.
She's so charming. Oh, she's so charming. I fall in love with her every time.
Well, that scene is great. I want to tell you what my favorite scene is.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one with Charles Ruggles as Major Horace Applegate. And he is the neighbor, and it's not really said, but it's kind of alluded to. There's kind of a love interest between him and
May Robeson and Aunt Elizabeth.
Yeah, you kind of get the hint that they kind of have a thing for each other when they're all having dinner. So he's there, the aunt's there, Katharine Hepburn's character, I can't remember her name, and Cary Grant are there. And
Susan Vance and David.
Quickly, they have a dog who reminds me very much of Eddie on Frasier, who he takes the dinosaur bone that Grant has been waiting for, and he buries it somewhere in the yard. So they're following the dog to try and find where he buried this bone. So
Here, George.
Yes, that goes on for a very long time.
Good George. Yeah.
They finally get pulled into the house to have dinner with the major and the aunt.
Right.
But every time the dog walks by, Cary Grant just stands up and just wanders off. And they're all like, this guy is insane. And he just keeps doing that. And it's just hysterical. I was laughing out loud.
What is his pretend name? Do you remember that in that?
Dr. Bones.
Yes. It's so funny. Major Applegate. It just Charlie Ruggles is so insufferable. He plays the know-it-all. He knows everything. And
God, yes.
Baby the leopard, of course, is crying, and he's like, "That's a loon." And Hepburn and Karen are like, "That's Baby. That's the leopard," because they're trying to keep the leopard away from Aunt Elizabeth. They don't want Aunt Elizabeth to know there's a leopard in the barn. And as it turns out, of course, it's actually Aunt Elizabeth's leopard, which it's just, oh my God. I love when they all come together in the prison. And it's just one comic bit of brilliance after another. It's so genius.
Yeah, the prison is just awesome because you get almost all the crazies in one small place.
Yes. And Walter Catlett.
First of all, they're locked up, and then they're hiding from the leopard. It's leopard, right? Yeah, it's a leopard.
Yeah, there's two leopards.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was played by one leopard, is what I'm told. That's true.
Yeah. Two characters. Yes, Nisi was the leopard's name.
One of the leopards is tame, and that's the one. And
that's
then
Baby.
Of course, then a wild leopard, because we have to have this, gets loose, and they keep mistaking him for the tame one. So comedy ensues.
Comedy definitely ensues. Insanity ensues. And what a wonderful, it's 102 minutes of heaven, as far as I'm concerned.
Shall we go to What's Up, Doc?
Now, which leads us to What's Up, Doc? Isn't that interesting? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So What's Up, Doc came out in 1972. And the star of the film is the city of San Francisco and the beautiful Hotel San Francisco, which they call the Hotel Bristol. That is the star of the film.
The Hilton. It was the Hilton, actually.
Oh, the Hilton. Yes, you were correct.
It's the Hilton, yes.
And then there's two other kind of co-stars. There's Barbara Streisand, and you may have heard of her. She's Judy Maxwell. And Ryan O'Neal as Howard Bannister, as in sliding down the. But he's also known as Steve. Because Judy keeps calling him Steve for whatever reason, which is part of the whole,
why. I'll tell you why.
Which is part of the whole fun in the film. So the story is, it's very simple. There are 4 overnight plaid bags. One has Judy's clothes in it. One has Howard Bannister's igneous rocks. Now, we'll get to why he's carrying igneous rocks. The rocks are replacing the bones in the first movie. Then we have Jules, Mabel Albertson, who she was incredible. You probably know her as playing Phyllis Stevens, Darren Stevens' mother. I think that's what most people know her as.
Yes,
and
Frank, I have a sick headache.
Yeah, Frank, I have a sick headache. Picture her in was it a tiger? What was that outfit she
Leopard
wore?
print.
Leopard print.
It's a hallmark. It's a yell back to Bring Up Baby.
Yes, a leopard print dress, high boots, and leopard print shorts.
Go pants.
She looks fabulous. Well, she has a bag of jewels because she's very wealthy. And then the other one is top secret documents. And there's an activist who has those, and then a government agent who's trying to get them back. And of course, their names are Smith and Jones, which is great. What I think is hysterical, because it's so obvious, if the activist stole the documents, why would the government agent have to chase him around for it? They would have arrested the guy. But then you wouldn't have the hysterical. It's just hysterical. The agent Jones is with his golf clubs. We'll get to that. It's just great. So that actually is really the story. Judy Maxwell's clothes is the only bag that nobody is interested in. Well, actually, Howard's. Nobody's really after Howard's. But people were after the jewels and people were after the top secret documents. And all these bags are getting switched around. So everybody has the wrong bag. And that is really what happens. And a huge portion of this film takes place in one hallway.
Yeah, that brilliant hallway, that garish, brilliant hallway.
Well, the garish, brilliant hallway, which was a set, matches the garish, actual, real lobby of the Hilton. And my God, you look at that and you're like, oh, thank God the 60s is over, or the early 70s.
Yes, it's all about 4 plaid suitcases. You know, it's interesting. Originally, there were only 3 suitcases. Did you know that?
No.
The original script was written by David Newman and Robert Benton, who wrote Bonnie and Clyde. Only had 3 suitcases. And then Buck Henry came in because the script needed some major doctoring. And he added the 4th. And the reason he added the 4th was the one with the top secret papers, because the Pentagon papers were everywhere at this time. So the 4th actually represents the Pentagon papers. But anyway, so circling back to some of the things you said, yes, Mabel Albertson, Mrs. Stevens, you know, it's just so wonderful. Somebody said, you know, how can they say that What's Up, Doc is based on Bringing Up Baby? There's no leopard. And I'm like, no, there's not a leopard, but there's a cougar. And it's Mrs. Van Hoskins.
Oh, yeah. She has her young men.
She has her young men, and she is hysterically funny. She's hysterically funny. You know, there's so much about, there's so many things to say about this movie that I adore so much. And I know that you do too. You know, and it's funny because it all kind of started with Elliot Gould. All right. Now, would you think that What's Up, Doc started with Barbra Streisand's ex-husband? But it did, because Elliot Gould was working on this film called A Glimpse of Tiger, and he basically had a breakdown. He was a big star at this time. MASH had come out, Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice. They had just gotten divorced, and he had a breakdown. And so Warner Brothers, as you do, the head of Warner Brothers contacted Barbara, his ex-wife, and says, do you want to take over this film? I guess I don't know why. But anyway, so Barbara was to take over this film called A Glimpse of Tiger, but she was also dating Ryan O'Neal at this point, because she was just divorced from Elliot Gould. So she wanted to be sure that there was a part for Ryan O'Neal in it. Now, at about this time, there was a film that had just finished production and was making, quote unquote, the Bel Air circuit, which is basically the homes, the screening rooms of all the bigwigs in Hollywood. And it was a movie called The Last Picture Show. And it had a tremendous buzz. And it was directed by this young Orson Welles type director, this wunderkind, young boy wonder named Peter Bogdanovich. And what happened was the head of Warner Brothers Production, John Calley, screened The Last Picture Show for Barbara. And Barbara saw it and turned to John Calley and said, I want him to direct A Glimpse of Tiger. That's how that happened. Bogdanovich, thrilled, wanted to work with Barbra Streisand, but he didn't want to work with her in this drama. He wanted to work with her in a comedy, a screwball comedy, like the kind that he grew up loving as a kid. And because in his mind, she was kind of like the closest thing around to a Hepburn, Carole Lombard screwball comedy heroine. So Barbara wanted to work with Peter Bogdanovich, and she agreed to do this screwball comedy, which became What's Up, Doc, which is a really long way of going into the weeds, but you got a film historian here, so you're going to get the background. And I find that background fascinating. Do you?
Yes, I do. I didn't know all of that. I kind of heard about the Elliot Gould thing. I forgot that she and Ryan were dating. So
yeah.
Now I see how he got the movie. And let me speak to Ryan in this role, because you mentioned that he was trying to be Cary Grant. And I read an old review by Roger Ebert, and he said Ryan O'Neal is no Cary Grant. And as you told me before, even Cary Grant said he's not Cary Grant. So first of all, that's unfair.
Cary Grant said Cary Grant wasn't Cary Grant, not that Ryan O'Neal wasn't Cary Grant.
Yeah. Well, actually, Roger Ebert, though, said Ryan O'Neal
wasn't, right.
But I see this as very different. Cary Grant's character in Bringing Up Baby was crazy. Ryan O'Neal has a lot of funny lines, but because he's so stuffy, he is really the straight man in this movie. Mm-hmm. So I see the characters as so different that I don't think there can be a Karen. I think Ryan O'Neal did brilliant. I think it was perfect. and look delicious, but that's a whole different story.
Well, he's a strangely buff musicologist. I mean,
Yeah.
Send me to Ames, Iowa, if that's who I'm going to be, because wow. I mean, Ryan O'Neal, they're both, if you notice, he's also a very strangely tanned musicologist. Both he and Streisand.
From Iowa.
Oh, yeah, from Iowa. I mean, they're just gorgeous, gorgeous people in this. I think Streisand is at her most sexy. I don't think she's
gorgeous.
Ever been more appealing. And that was the thing, too. That was what a lot of the reviewers responded to, was that this was Streisand light. You know, this was a Streisand who was tailored for the masses, and clearly worked because the film was a huge hit. But going back to the Ryan O'Neal thing, Ryan O'Neal had never done a comedy before. Love Story had come out in 1970 and, you know, was the movie to end all movies. So Ryan O'Neal was a humongous star, but he had never done a comedy and he didn't really know how. So he did Peter Bogdanovich in kind of modeling him on Cary Grant in Bringing Up Baby, which was also modeled on Harold Lloyd. So he was trying to give Ryan O'Neal something to play, but even then, Ryan O'Neal couldn't necessarily get it. So what Ryan O'Neal was essentially doing was playing Peter Bogdanovich. Peter Bogdanovich would place Ryan O'Neal, you know, would give him the line readings, would position him. In fact, it's very funny. Bogdanovich got so used to giving Ryan O'Neal attitudes and Ryan O'Neal line readings that he absentmindedly, and maybe for expedience's sake, gave one to Streisand. And she stopped filming and she turned to him and she said, "Are you giving me a line reading?" And he never did that again. Because you don't give Barbra Streisand a line reading. So I see what you're saying. I find he works though. He's incredibly, as she is, incredibly appealing in this film.
I think they both are. I love them both.
Are.
And I mentioned the Igneous Rocks, and because Tony just mentioned that he's a musicologist, the story of the Igneous Rocks is they are there for this music convention, and he and Kenneth Mars, who's fabulous in his role as Hugh, I can't remember Hugh's last name.
Hugh Simon.
Oh, he's
Hugh Simon. I am you, Simon. I am you. You are me. I am you. Stop saying that.
You've never loved to hate a character more. He's brilliant. Those two are up against trying to get this money to do further investigation on their theories.
Yes, $1 million grant.
No, actually, it's only $20,000.
I'm sorry, $20,000 grant. It's $1 million in Bringing Up Baby.
Yeah, that's what really blew my mind. It's $1 million in Bringing Up Baby, and then 40 years later, it's
$20,000.
$20,000. So what Howard Bannister's trying to prove is, it just makes no sense. He has this tuning fork, and he keeps banging on rocks because he wants to prove that early man used certain rocks for music, which I don't know how you could prove that, but it's just absurd. Yeah. So that is why they are in San Francisco.
Well, yeah. And here's the interesting thing too, some more factoids behind the scenes, is the original setting in Newman and Benton's original script. The setting was not San Francisco. The setting was Chicago. And I don't want to go too deeply into the weeds of Peter Bogdanovich and Polly Platt, his estranged wife, but Polly Platt was the production designer. And Polly Platt was someone that Bogdanovich, even though they were separated because he had an affair with Sybil Shepherd on The Last Picture Show, he valued Polly Platt. And Polly Platt is the one who said, Chicago is too close to New York. You really need a fish out of water location for Barbara. And she's the one who flew to San Francisco and stayed in the Hilton, by the way, and realized that this movie that Peter Bogdanovich envisioned as a living cartoon was perfectly set in San Francisco, because San Francisco is kind of like an otherworldly place. And San Francisco hadn't been overdone in movies the way New York had been overdone. There were some movies that were set in San Francisco, but the audiences weren't saturated with San Francisco. So it was still kind of like a strange kind of Netherland. So, with the hills and yes, it is. The hills and, Lombard Street with the turns and everything. It was just a fantastic place. It was like Oz in many ways. So she was instrumental in getting the film's location changed to San Francisco. She was also instrumental in many other things in the film. She was instrumental in putting the trench coat, which I love, putting the trench coat on Barbara Streisand, because that was Polly Platt's trench coat.
Oh.
And I love Streisand in that trench coat. It's such a great, it's an iconic image. So she was instrumental in that. But I think that she was also instrumental in the Hilton. She went to the Hilton. She was like, this place is outrageous in its decor. So that's why they set the film in the Hilton Hotel.
It worked
in San Francisco.
Now, it's hard for me to imagine what it would have looked like in Chicago. It may have worked, but watching this film, it's just so hard to imagine because they have every San Francisco cliche there ever was. All the hills, running up and down the hills or driving up and down the hills. They, of course, in San Francisco, they have Chinese New Year every day. So, of course, there has to be a Chinese dragon, which, do you know what the music they're playing while the Chinese dragon, they're having this Chinese festival?
What's the music?
They are playing La Cucaracha.
That's right, they are.
I'm like, it took me, I don't know how long before one day I'm like, wait a minute, that's La Cucaracha.
That's La Cucaracha. There's not much to see, actually. We're inside a Chinese dragon.
Yeah, so, and on top of that, they drive down Lombard Street, of course, the winding. They do all the San Francisco cliches. Now, I don't know if they're the first, but that is why I said the city of San Francisco is the star of this film.
It is the star of it. It is the star of it. And that chase scene, okay, here's the idea. The budget of What's Up, Doc was $4 million. A quarter of that was spent on the chase scene. The chase scene near the end of the movie, not at the very end of the movie, near the end of the movie. And yes, that was definitely developed after they changed the locale from Chicago to San Francisco because they wanted to take advantage of the incredible topography of this wonderland that they were in, this kind of otherworldly place. A couple of things about the chase scene, which I find amazing, of course, besides the fact that it's hysterically funny and inventive, is that they didn't have, this was back when you could do this, I guess. They didn't have permits to film in some locations.
Oh, my Lord.
There's a scene in the chase scene where the cars, I mean, they're going all over the place. The cars come down the steps at Alta Plaza Park, which is a park in the Pacific Heights area of San Francisco. And you can clearly see the damage these cars are doing to these steps. And the city of San Francisco didn't know they were going to do this. And the city
I always wondered about that because I'm like, they're going to have to fix those steps.
They didn't. You can go today, to this day, and every time I go to San Francisco, or not every time, I'm not that much of a freak, but almost every time I go to San Francisco, I will go to Alta Plaza Park and you can see the cracks in the steps. They fixed some of them, of course, but you can still see the damage they did to those steps. So, I mean, that's insane to me. The whole chase scene is insane, insanely funny.
I haven't been to San Francisco in ages, and now you make me want to go there just to check that out.
I have pictures. Go to Alta Plaza Park.
Every time I watch that scene, I'm like, they just damaged those steps. And the last time I just watched it for the show, I was not going to watch it. And I'm going to tell you, there's a very important reason I did, because I had a huge discovery. But the last time I just recently watched it,
I would think you'd watch it for this podcast we're doing right now.
You don't know how many times I've watched this movie.
No,
I just watched this just recently. So I didn't think I had to. And then I'm like, I probably should, because maybe I forgot some stuff. I didn't forget anything, but I did have a aha moment. So anyway, every time I watch that, I'm like, it must be a set. They wouldn't let them do that to that sidewalk.
To Alta Plaza?
To the stairs, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was watching with my friend and he said on Lombard Street, he said, is that? I said, I'm like, no, it's Lombard Street. That's real. They're actually driving that way down Lombard Street. I don't think you could do that today. I mean, obviously San Francisco learned its lesson after What's Up, Doc almost decimated the city with this chase. But it's such an incredible set piece, and the things that happen, and the Chinese, we're inside a Chinese dragon, and they get in the car and they go into the ocean and they're fished out of the ocean. One thing we haven't mentioned, and it's funny that we're this far into What's Up, Doc, and we haven't mentioned this, is the brilliant genius of Madeline Kahn. Can we just have a moment of silence for the brilliant genius, the comedic insanity of Madeline Kahn?
You don't have to ask me twice.
And this was Madeline Kahn's film debut, in case anybody doesn't know that. This was her first film.
She is amazing. I think some people would argue that she is the star if she had more scenes, but actually she's better as a secondary character because she's perfect.
Yes.
If she was,
I would agree
if she
with
was
you.
a star, it'd be a little too much. She is beautiful.
This film is so, as Bringing Up Baby is, it is chock full of brilliant comedic character actors that just ratchet up the insanity level. We mentioned Kenneth Mars playing Hugh Simon, who's actually named after a critic named John Simon that Bogdanovich had problems with. So that's Bogdanovich's revenge, is naming this idiot character after you. Of course, Mabel Albertson playing Mrs. Van Hoskins, Sorrel Book. There are so many brilliant characters in this film that feed off of each other. Austin Pendleton.
Oh, he was great.
I mean, these wonderful people. I recently read that Mel Brooks was putting together his quote unquote repertory company at about the same time that What's Up Doc came out. And you can see half these people who are in this film. Liam
Dunn.
Liam Dunn. Yeah, I know. I was
Oh, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
Okay. Liam Dunn, who plays the judge, was a casting director. And Bogdanovich knew him and he had an entire career in Mel Brooks films. Liam Dunn, Kenneth Mars, and Austin. I mean, all these people ended up in Mel Brooks films, and Madeline Kahn, obviously, because they were so genius. But Madeline Kahn truly sets the bar for comedic brilliance. Don't you think so?
Oh, yeah. I mean, she's brilliant. Her timing is perfect. Her lines are perfect. The way she is Eunice Burns.
Mm-hmm.
She is Eunice Burns. She's played so many great characters, but in this movie, that she's all I think about.
Yeah, well, I mean, I heard what you were saying, and I know where you're going. She almost steals the picture.
Yeah,
she almost does, which is a pretty amazing thing considering your star is Barbra Streisand. I mean, there's been a lot of talk. One of the legends about this movie, I don't know if it's a legend. It's a legend to me, is that Streisand wasn't crazy about What's Up, Doc. She didn't think it was funny. She kept telling Peter Bogdanovich during the filming, Peter, I know funny, this isn't funny. And I think it's because she wasn't the funniest. I mean, this is the first time really since her Broadway debut, and I can get it for you wholesale, that she was part of an ensemble. She wasn't the main show. So she's sharing the screen with this, collection of oddballs who are just scene stealers by nature. And she was probably feeling like, am I funny enough? Am I funny enough? Well, she is. She's the spark plug that holds this whole thing together. And Madeline Kahn is just the brilliant comet that comes out, and you adore her. You adore her. We lost someone else who died too young. She died.
Oh,
in the
yeah,
50s,
absolutely.
Much too young. When you said that Madeline Kahn is Eunice Burns, yes, she makes Eunice Burns her own. But Madeline Kahn had some issues because Madeline Kahn was a beautiful woman. All you got to do is watch Blazing Saddles.
Oh, yeah.
When she does Lily von Stupp, she's a curvaceous, buxom, beautiful girl. Operatic voice. She studied opera. She was on Broadway. So she kind of felt a little... She didn't have the greatest feelings about Eunice Burns and what it did to her persona. I mean, she kind of dealt with that the rest of her life. So she always tried to go away from that, as you can see in other films that she did, like Paper Moon, where she plays this buxom kind of, this vixen, and in Blazing Saddles.
And I'm sorry to hear that, because I thought she was brilliant in this film. And then Blazing Saddles, a totally different character, and you believed her there too.
Yeah.
She was that character as well. And
she's a brilliant performer.
Talking about the cast, I got to say, I'm not going to say this is the best movie ever, but I think it was perfect. This movie is perfect. It's perfect. There is not a single person that wasn't casted just right. There is not a single scene in this film that I would take out. There is not a single line in this film that I would take out. It's nonstop. They did a brilliant job of only making it 90 minutes long.
Right? So
there's not a dull moment. The only time you get to take a breath is at the end when they've tied up the loose ends and everybody's going their own way.
Yeah.
That's the only time you really take a breath. And even that's funny.
From the get-go, it just goes and you have to keep up with it. Back to the Bringing Up Baby illusion, I wanted to mention this at the top when you talked about their name. So another reason why people think that this is a remake of Bringing Up Baby is because of the characters' names. Howard Bannister is named after Howard Hawks, who was the director of Bringing Up Baby. Total homage to Howard Hawks. And the reason she calls him Steve is because Steve was Howard Hawks' wife's nickname for him. Howard Hawks' wife at the time that Bring a Baby, was none other than Slim. Her name was Slim Keith. She was one of Truman Capote's swans. If you just watch Swans Feud, you know who Slim Hawks is. So that was her nickname for him, was Steve. And Howard Hawks took that also and put it in To Have and Have Not. Lauren Bacall calls Humphrey Bogart's character Steve in To Have and Have Not, even though his name is Harry. So that's where that comes from, the whole Steve Howard thing. Barbara Streisand's character's name is Judy, as a tribute to Cary Grant, because impersonators always do Judy, even though Cary Grant never said that in any film. He never went Judy. He said one Judy. So that was an homage to Cary Grant. So that's also another reason why the people, I think, feel that this film is based on Bring Up Baby. But there's a bunch of films that What's Up Doc calls out. As I said, it calls out the Lady Eve. It calls out the awful truth in the courtroom scene. A whole bunch of silent films, including Seven Chances, the Buster Keaton film. That scene where the garbage cans are rolling down the hill and the guy starts to run and he jumps. That's out of a Buster Keaton. It was rocks in the Buster Keaton film called Seven Chances. As I just said, To Have and Have Not, Caine Mutiny. I mean, there's just so many references. What Bogdanovich was doing was harking back to all these classic films to make this modern screwball comedy.
Well, I want to talk about two things for sure. One, I want to talk about the revelation I had this last time I watched it. And then I want to get a little bit into the dialogue because it's part of its perfection.
It is.
The revelation I had is I've always wondered, why is this movie called What's Up, Doc? She says that when Howard Bannister meets Judy for the first time, she says, "What's up, Doc?" I think she even bites into a carrot, doesn't she?
Yes, she does. She
bites into a carrot. She said, "What's up, Doc?" And then at the end of the movie, in the plane, we see Bugs and Elmer doing the What's Up, Doc dance routine that's so famous. And I thought, why else? Watching it, it really became obvious to me. Barbara Streisand is Bugs, and Howard is Elmer. Because Elmer was the straight man, but was a bit goofy.
I love that connection, Brad.
And I love that connection. I didn't make that connection until I heard Bogdanovich. I know I just
Bogdanovich.
When I heard that, because I always heard it was Bringing Up Baby, I only recently learned that he said this is going to be a cartoon.
Yeah, a living
and once
cartoon.
I read that, I thought it through, and I'm like, aha.
Plus,
so I don't know if I'm right. I don't know if I'm right, but that is my theory because it works for me.
No, you are partially right. Plus, the film was made at Warner Brothers. Who owned Warner Brothers? I mean, not who owned Warner Brothers. The film was made at Warner Brothers. Who did Bugs Bunny? Bugs Bunny was Warner Brothers. I mean, that was part of the studio. So actually, it was Polly Platt once again who said, if you're going to make a living cartoon and we're at Warner Brothers, why don't you call it What's Up, Doc? Because we can do that. We're at Warner Brothers. And the reason he bookends it with Porky Pig at the end going, that's all, folks, is because he was driving home the point of this is a living cartoon. These people are cartoons. But I love that. I love that analogy you made. That's a great analogy.
He did very well. And also, I was wanted to just touch on the dialogue as part of where I think this show is perfection. There's two movies that I think just are amazing when it comes to great lines that you can quote. Steel Magnolias and Birdcage. There's probably others, but those are the two I can quote virtually every line from both of those films. And I always thought What's Up, Doc would be the same, but it's not. There's a couple lines that can stand alone, like "Don't shoot me, I'm part Italian." You don't need a frame of reference to understand that. And snakes, as you know, live in mortal fear of tile. Now that just sounds absurd just hearing it. But what I realized is, as I'm looking through the dialogue, most of these are not funny if they stand alone.
Right.
They have to have the frame of reference. And
the characters.
Yes. But
the actors.
When you get those, it is brilliant. So the dialogue, it's the back and forth is what makes it like, one of my favorite scene. Who is that dangerously unbalanced woman? If you watch that scene, what I just said isn't funny, But if you watch that scene, it's hysterical.
No, I agree with you. And it's the actor's inflections. Every single line, Madeline Kahn all she has to say is Howard, and you're in hysterics.
Yes.
Because of the way she says it. I am not a Eunice Burns. I am the Eunice Burns. I don't have a badge for Eunice Burns. I agree with you on some levels, but there are some for me personally, this was a big movie when I was in college. We would constantly quote, I think we talked about this. We would constantly quote High Anxiety and What's Up, Doc? And we would quote the lines like, why those are Howard's, what on earth are you doing with Howard Bannister's rocks? Now, the reason that's so funny is because of the way Madeline Kahn says it.
Right.
I also like, I am you, you are me. No, I am you. Stop saying that. Make him stop saying. So it's the way, it's the context.
Yes.
And it's the characters, the characters who are saying them are just so perfect.
So listener,
Hugh Simon. Oh God, I love that character.
So listener, if I say you're upside down, it's not funny. It is very funny in this movie.
Yes, it's definitely a character driven. Yes, absolutely. I would agree with you. The lines are best said out of the mouths of these insane characters created by these brilliant comic actors.
And Austin Pendleton, towards the end of the film, when he's having this event at his home, very beautiful San Francisco home, and there's a large number of people there. It's a function, and a gunfight starts. And his brilliant line is, "This is inexcusable. You can't come in here uninvited."
And you notice the butler at the door who just opens the door and lets them out and then closes and folds his hands again, just like the waiter when the hotel room's on fire.
The waiter in the room is hysterical. The waiter comes in. He's the room service waiter, and he's setting up the little table nice and fancy. And it's pure chaos all over the room. Things are burning down. People are crashing through windows. And he doesn't blink. He continues to set up this little table.
Yeah, he puts the ice cream sundaes down, which is in. You notice how also this is another interesting thing. So there's always food being delivered because that's Streisand, because Streisand is legendary for always wanting to eat. She was on the inside the actor's studio and she goes, "What? You don't have a Kit Kat? Do you have anything to eat here?" So Bogdanovich put that in where this character Judy Maxwell is always hungry. She's always eating. So she orders the roast beef sandwich, mustard on top, mayonnaise on the bottom, and a coffee, hot fudge sundae, bottle of Diet Anything, is what she says. And so he's putting the food down on the tray, and then they're picking the food up and trying to put the fire out.
Yeah. But he continues to do what he's doing.
And John Hillerman, we forgot about John Hillerman, who has one wonderful scene as the hotel manager who comes in after the chaos and says, "Mr. Bannister, I have a message for you from the hotel staff." And Brian O'Neill goes, "Oh, really? What's that?" "Goodbye."
John Hillerman has a very short role, and he's perfect in it.
Mm-hmm. Someone else who became a Brooks repertory actor, though, John Hillerman. He's in a lot of Mel Brooks stuff.
And then Liam Dunn, who plays the judge, he's perfect. He has a bigger role because it's a pretty big role. But the bailiff is Graham Jarvis, who's perfect. Now, I always get him confused with Frank Oz because they look very similar.
Mm-hmm. I see what you're saying.
But he was great, even though it was a very small role. Sorrel Brooks, who people know as Boss Hogg, he plays the hotel security that's trying to rob the jewels.
Couldn't I just kill her?
Yes.
That's another genius moment when he's trying to stop Mabel Albertson, and he says, "Use your charm," and he's like, "Use your charm, use your charm." So he trips her, and then he keeps tripping her. It just built and built and built.
Here's what I love about that as she's trying to walk to her room, he keeps tripping her through the lobby. And then when up in the floor, the elevator opens up and he continues as she's trying to get to her room, tripping her. I'm like, what happened in the elevator from the lobby to that floor? Was he tripping her in circles?
It's so ingenious. And Bogdanovich said that was only supposed to happen once, but it got such they just loved it so much, the initial trip, that they said, why don't we just continue it through? And so that's why when they come up in the elevator and she's walking to the hall, he's tripping her again. And then he's fighting with her on the floor and they do karate poses. And he says, stop. Couldn't I just do what you want? Tell her you are in love with her and want to make mad, passionate love to her. Couldn't I just kill her?
And Mabel Albertson, again, one of her brilliant moments. And again, it's one of these that you have to see to realize how funny it is. when she realizes her jewels have been stolen.
Oh, yes.
And she goes running to the lobby, thieves, robbers, and she collapses to the floor and she's screaming and she looks around and everybody's just kind of looking at her like she's nuts.
It's so over the top. And we talked about lines that, you know, aren't funny on paper, but they're funny the way the characters do them. That was a line that we always did in college. And you would hear people in my college, someone that scream, ah, and you hear someone go, thieves, robbers, thieves. And it's just funny because it's so over the top and she's so funny at it. It is. It's the characters and the context of these lines. Well, I think I want to say about What's Up, Doc is unlike Bringing Up Baby, there's no question about the success of What's Up, Doc. What's Up, Doc broke a 33-year-old house record at Radio City Music Hall. Now, I'm pretty sure everybody's familiar with Radio City Music Hall, but it's 6,500 seats are in Radio City Music Hall. And this was when it was a $2 top. Movie ticket cost $2.
Wow.
And it broke a 33-year-old record at Radio City Music Hall. In fact, Peter Bogdanovich talks about when the movie was completed, he called Cary Grant because he was good friends with Cary Grant. And Cary Grant, and I'm not going to try to imitate Cary Grant, but Cary Grant said, you know, he told him he was going to play at Radio City. And Cary said, oh, that's wonderful. I had many films play Radio City. He said, I tell you what you should do. You should go in the back of the theater and just listen to the sound of 6,500 people laughing at something you created. It'll do your heart good. And Peter Bogdanovich did that, and he said it was one of the greatest moments of his life. So What's Up, Doc ended up grossing $66 million, third highest grossing film of 1972 behind The Godfather and The Poseidon Adventure. So, you know, that's not a bad third place. If you're going to be
a very different movie than the other two.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a tremendous success. It was never really replicated again. The interesting thing about Peter Bogdanovich is that after this, he went on to direct Paper Moon, which is also an homage to, it's in black and white. It's also a very different film, but a very wonderful film. I highly recommend Paper Moon. And then Polly Platt stopped working with him because by this time they were divorced. And the only reason she had worked with him on What's Up, Doc was because if she worked on What's Up, Doc, she could be allowed into the production because she was the production designer. She could be allowed into the union if she worked on a studio film. So that's the only reason she agreed to do it. And then the only reason she agreed to do Paper Moon was because Ryan O'Neal begged her to do it. And then she stopped. And strangely after that, Peter Bogdanovich, kind of his run of great films ended. So there's a lot of controversy about who was really the genius behind these films. These first films, was it Peter Bogdanovich or was it Polly Platt? So Polly Platt went on to have a very illustrious career. She was nominated for an Oscar for Terms of Endearment. She worked on Broadcast News, War of the Roses. I mean, these are some wonderful films. So you draw your own conclusions from who was really the mastermind behind these great films of the early 70s that Peter Bogdanovich directed.
And I know you and I are both a little skeptical of AFI, the American Film Institute's list of the top 100 films.
Right.
The fact that this movie is not on, I looked at the list of movies on there. I'm like, What's Up, Doc should be on there. I'm going to give an example. It's not even on
their comedy. It's not even on their comedy list.
It is on their comedy list, but as far as the top 100 is not there. What is on there? One example is It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life is a nice, heartwarming film. I can't argue. I enjoy it like everybody else every year, but it is no way better than this film. And there are other examples I can give as well.
Well, you know how I feel about Jimmy Stewart. I'm not a big Jimmy Stewart fan, so
yeah,
I find that ridiculous. I think that What's Up, Doc, on just for the cast alone, just for Madeline Kahn's film debut alone, it's should definitely be on the list. Any final thoughts on Bringing Up Baby or What's Up, Doc?
No, I think I will say I think What's Up, Doc, and I think you probably agree, is far superior to Bringing Up Baby. And some people may say that's unfair.
Oh, I don't agree with you at all on that.
No, I think it's far superior. Far, far superior.
Oh, I don't. I'm sorry.
I liked Bringing Up Baby. I actually laughed a lot, but I think there were moments where it could have been better. I think the casting could have been better. Not every character to me was perfect. So that's
you
why
feel
I
every
think,
character is perfect in What's Up, Doc?
Oh yeah, I would have a really hard time finding a flaw. There's only one flaw I can see, and it's just a blooper as far as the stunt goes.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, everything's perfect.
Oh, and What's Up, Doc? I'm going to come back to that. But What's Up, Doc was the first, I believe, according to Bogdanovich, was the first film to actually give credit to the stunt people. If you watch the credits, the stunt people are listed. Thank God, because these stunt people worked their asses off in this film, and they deserve the credit. So that's kudos to What's Up, Doc for that. No, I don't agree with you on that, because in my top 5, Bringing Up Babies in my top 5, and I think What's Up, Doc's like number 6 or 7.
I'm in shock. I can't imagine. Well, anyway, I am in shock.
Well,
I thought for sure we would be on the same level here.
Well, but What's Up, Doc's like 6.
Okay.
In my list, and Bringing Up Babies maybe 4. So they're pretty close. But I will always, 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 as much as I love Streisand, and as much as I lust over 1972's Ryan O'Neal, I will always go to Hepburn and Grant. Always.
Do you enjoy going to Hollywood? Well, of course you do. And Tony and I would like you to do something for us, and more important, for other podcast listeners out there. Go to Apple Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and rate and review the show. A 5-star would be especially nice. That way, when others are looking for a new show, they'll see ours and see those reviews, and they will stop and listen. And boy, that will make their day. It will be much appreciated. Thank you for being with us.